Yo, I don't know what everyone is talking about. I think the combat from FF7R looks perfect. Anyways, we're going in on spoilers hard almost immediately, so you've been warned. Alright, for real this time. Let's mosey.
Beautiful.
Well, folks, it's finally here! The official remake of Final Fantasy VII, with all the stunning spectacle, cross-dressing side quests, and pissed-off buildings that anyone could ask for. There's no shortage of things to love about this game, both as a recreation of an old-time classic and as its own beast. This thing is an absolute triumph for not just game design, but animation, environment design, and the ways this game takes key moments from this abstract, lo-fi PS1 game and manages to polish and refine them into moments of tangible nostalgia that not only often live up to, but frequently surpass how they made me feel when I first played them is sincerely stunning. Never once did I think I'd ever see Midgar so thoroughly brought to life. It's absolutely unbelievable. It's so incredibly easy to get lost in the mood and tone of the slum's ramshackle corridors and narrow alleyways as you pass by people talking in hushed whispers about their day-to-day struggles to get by, and their fear of those who literally stand above them. Also, while we're here, don't want to make a big deal about this or anything, but oh my god, Cloud's real! Look at him! They even kept the spikes! Not only that, but Cloud actually acts like himself. He's appropriately standoffish and aloof without letting him feel like the angsty edgelord that so much of the auxiliary media was ready to redefine him as. Plus, thank God, he's a massive dork. This man has never seen a titty. Meanwhile, Barrett's been brought to life with such a high level of playful banter that even Mass Effect is starting to sweat a little. And if you don't feel something when he's in the same room as Marlene, then not to be rude, but frankly I think you eat people. Finally, there's Aerith, fully realized as the smug little manipulator she always was. Everything about her, from her design to her dialogue to the killer performance turned in by Brianna White, all come together to create one of the most instantly lovable characters we'll probably ever see. Just look this girl straight in her soulful little eyes and try to tell me this shit doesn't slap. I love this game. A lot. It's sincerely hard to find even a single piece of this that doesn't feel like it had a sizable amount of passion and love poured into it, all while successfully capturing the sense of excitement, tension, and spectacle that made the original the classic we know today. Yes indeed, I think it's safe to say that this game has truly recaptured the original spirit of Final Fantasy VII and gracefully brought it to a new generation for all to appreciate. Well, that's what I would be saying. You know, if it wasn't for...
I've got skills.
Be nice.
I'm doing my best.
You're looking awfully glum.
Well, this isn't quite what we were expecting, was it? Before we get into all the new stuff that everyone's actually heated about, let this be said. Some of the changes are actually good. In fact, some of them are quite stellar, and some of them are so good that they should probably be made into a full party member at this point. Don't do this to me, Nomura. The extent to which Nomura, Nojima, and the rest of the team over at Square Enix has seized this opportunity to flesh out and humanize basically every character they can justify giving even a moment of screen time to is damn impressive. In the original game, Johnny had like 10 lines in the whole run. Here, he's got a full comic relief side quest about how much he sucks as a human. Show of hands, who expected to come out of this game caring about Wedge even a little? Yeah, me neither. Getting Badger from Breaking Bad was some sincerely inspired casting, let me tell ya.
Gotta prove to the man I'm rehabilitated, upstanding citizen. You think you could maybe hook me up with some crystal?
I'm not going to spoiler this kid's storyline because I don't think most people have gotten there yet, but for those of you who know everything about him, this character was definitely made by Yoko Taro, right? 9S's lost brother over here.
I'm not some princess who needs to be coddled. Shit.
That wasn't in the original game, but it should have been. I also really like how Shinra is presented here, particularly in the scene where you get to see their history from their perspective. It does a great job of showing how someone could pretty easily see Shinra as the good guys if they just swallow enough of the corporate propaganda without knowing any better. Also, just about damn near every boss here has been cranked to 11. Some of these are legit Platinum Games level fights. The Airbuster and Rufus in particular stand out as potentially the best boss fights we'll see this year, and I can't believe they kept this in. I was so sure they were going to cut it because it's easily the goofiest thing in Midgar, but nah, they just own this wacky bullshit. Wait, it flies now? Also, while we're here, I'm going to drop a quick PSA. Attention everyone who is super upset about things like the train graveyard and the trek to Walmart being fleshed out into much longer journeys. The reason this is happening is because without it, we'd only have about 2 hours of playable Aerith in the entire game. That's it. There's already only 7 chapters out of the total 18 that feature a playable Aerith, and even then 2 of those only feature like 1 to 2 fights apiece. So we need all we can get. It's not there because they're trying to cynically pad the game's length or because they didn't realize it dragged down the pacing. It's there because, hi, our name is Square Enix and we spent about 200,000 man-hours and a couple $1 million making Aerith into a fully playable character who we're already, probably, going to have to abandon at the halfway mark of this whole project, so you best bet your sweet ass that we're going to make saving her in Hojo's lab an entire chapter. Feel free to critique how this affects the pacing and whether or not each section specifically is good. Lord knows I will. Dear God, the train yard sucks. But just be sure to keep in mind that the alternative here is basically just having... Oh wow, look, it's nothing. The only other option they had is straight up cutting these scenes to keep them to their original length. And doing so would mean that we have substantially less time to spend with the best character this game has to offer. I get that these sections are definitely not the strongest, but I'd still rather have the chance to spend more time with Aerith than not. That's how good this game is. Even the bad stuff here is, in its own way, still pretty good in the broader scheme of things. And all of this isn't even the half of it. The level of polish and enhancement on display may very well be unparalleled by any other video game remake ever released. There is still so much more positive stuff I could talk about, and some I definitely will go more in depth on, but if you've actually played this game, none of this stuff is probably what you think of when I mention the changes this remake has made. No, that dubious honor has to go to the Whispers, aka the will of the planet, aka the plot ghosts, aka...
I can see the future! I can have a kid! Real boo as a child! Don't try to drugs become a guy! God is the strongest in the universe, but still doesn't do crap! Oh no, they can see me!
Alright, let's try and get on the same page here. Lore-wise, these things are the manifestation of the planet's desire for a specific outcome, quite literally referred to as arbiters of fate, making them effectively the planet's way of forcing people down a path that will ultimately keep it safe, no matter the cost. Taken at face value, it's a very odd addition whose only role is to effectively force characters to do the things we already know they're supposed to do anyways. However, it doesn't take long to notice that our cast are doing things that, were they to play out in full, would radically change the course of the entire story as we know it, both for good and for bad. Avalanche doesn't want to hire Cloud for the second mission and are just going to work with the crew they have instead? Better injure one of the team so they have no choice but to hire Cloud to follow through on their plans. Cloud comes incredibly close to stopping the Turks from dropping the Sector 7 plate, but that's not how these things are supposed to play out, so the plot ghosts make sure this extreme prank gone wrong still goes down exactly as the planet god intends. Wow, that's actually really bleak when you think about it. They aren't just fulfilling the planet's will, they're fulfilling ours, making sure things align with our expectations, shaping the events of this game into what we think Final Fantasy VII is supposed to be. And if it isn't obvious enough by the early scenes, then it will start to become incredibly in your face by the time the cast starts talking about how they feel restricted by the path they found themselves railroaded down and their desperate need to break free from that to change fate. They're literally talking about the desire and need to defy audience expectations. Despite how it might feel at first blush, the Whispers aren't exactly an antagonistic force in the story, so much as one that has a set of rules that can't be negotiated with. Just a peak lawful neutral entity. The game doesn't think these spirits are bad, nor does it really want us to think that. If these things were just meant to be straight up bad, then we'd still have a Barrett corpse on the ground. 'Cause we, those of us who are fans, would kind of really hate that, yeah? Barrett dying at all would be a huge curveball, but this early in the game, before we even get to see some of his best moments? No way, dude. Absolutely not. So we're just gonna... there we go. Some boundaries are meant to stay in place, some are meant to be crossed. This isn't about audience good or audience bad. We, much like the Whispers themselves, are almost incidental to the struggle that's going on here. Instead, this is about how a team of creators feel beholden to limit their imagination by the nature of the task they've set themselves to, and the question of what kind of freedom should creators be allowed to have when remaking even their own iconic work. It's easy for us to say, oh silly Nomura, just remake it exactly as is. But how faithful is faithful enough? I quite like the backgrounds of the original FF7. I still think they look really cool, and changing them would undeniably alter the tone and style of the game. Should we be allowed to change those? Would this game have been better if the combat were still turn-based? Are we really going to say this experience isn't at least somewhat improved by things like Biggs and Wedge having personalities now? And how much are we going to complain now that we might get to see more of them? There's some interesting questions with some meaningful implications about the purpose of remakes as a form of art. And I'm sure there's someone out there right now, probably one that's some kind of Volpez, who's put together a video talking about exactly that.
Actually, it's funny that you mention it, but it's really interesting how this remake...
But that's not what I'm here to talk about.
Hey.
Point is that given the way this game has been remade, there's undeniably been a great deal that we've gained from the deviations from the source material. However, in cases like this, committing to pursuing those new aspects almost inherently means having to leave something behind in order to make room for those new elements. After all, if you change the story's entire foundation, it's pretty hard to keep all the elements of its original form intact. So what have we lost in this transition? What is the core of that white-hot, burning frustration that so many die-hard fans, myself included, felt immediately after finishing this game? To answer that, we'll have to take a look at the character who may have endured the most change in this remake. You know who I mean. I am of course talking about him.
Sephiroth.
Sephiroth is one of the most iconic villains, not just in JRPGs, not just in video games, but potentially all of modern pop culture, and for damn good reason. There are few characters out there who have had more opportunities to leave a lasting impression. You know him, maybe from the original game, maybe because you played Crisis Core, maybe because he violently dunked on you in Kingdom Hearts, maybe because of his legendary fight scene in Advent Children, maybe because of Death Battle, and maybe just because of sheer cultural osmosis. At this point, he's arguably more symbol than person, more representative of themes and emotion than as a grounded character. And this is something that follows Sephiroth into the remakes as well, in some subtle ways that have a much more meaningful impact than I think a lot of people may appreciate. Given the, complicated legacy this character has these days, it can be easy to lose sight of how he was originally presented when we first met him. But having that is key to understanding the ways in which the remake truly does differ. So, let's talk about that. What's most interesting about going back and looking at the original game is just how little Sephiroth there truly is there. Taken in its entirety, we only really encounter him a total of 7 times. Compared to earlier villains like Kefka, or even later villains like Kuja, the One-Winged Angel is surprisingly absent from his own story. Rufus gets more screen time. Hell, depending on how you want to count it, one could make the case that we only ever see the real Sephiroth in person thrice. First in the Nibelheim flashback, second when Cloud hands over the Black Materia in the Northern Crater, and finally when we confront him at the end of the game. Remember, the real Sephiroth spends the entire game chilling in the northern crater, slurping up all that good lifestream juice. Everything else we encounter in all likelihood is either a Sephiroth clone he's possessed, or a piece of Genova he's controlling. Sephiroth is not an especially present villain. And this feels like it should work against him, right? I mean, if he's showing up less, you'd think that should inherently make him a weaker antagonist. After all, the more scenes where we directly interact with him, the better, right? I can see how someone might reflexively think that. If you're a complete f***ing coward. The fact that we see so little of Sephiroth is key to what made him the legend we know him as today. And to see why, we only have to look at the two main ways he's introduced to us. The attack on Shinra HQ, and the slaying of the Midgar Zolom. But let's back up even further than those first, because while these may serve as some of the most important moments of the original Final Fantasy VII, these don't happen in a vacuum. No, instead there's plenty of subtle build-up to the exact moment we see the real consequences of Sephiroth's presence. More than once you'll hear him mentioned in passing, with two occasions in particular standing out. The first time we hear his name is when 14-year-old Cloud says he wants to join soldiers so he can be strong like the war hero Sephiroth, establishing him as someone Cloud admires. The second time we hear his name, though, is when we flash back to the moment that Tifa finds her father's body after being cut down, where she swears vengeance upon Sephiroth before charging into the next room to try and finish him off with his own blade. But these aren't the only things like this by any means either. For almost the first third of the game, Sephiroth is talked about in muted whispers and hushed murmurs. Before you even reach the Shinra HQ, you get the distinct sense that two things are true. There is a powerful and renowned warrior out there named Sephiroth, and he has done some truly terrible things. So when he shows up and starts using the innards of Shinra scientists as finger paints in what is easily the most brutal scene up to that point, before shoving a sword straight through the vertical center of President Shinra, you have some context for why Cloud suddenly takes everything that's going on very, very seriously. This is of course immediately complemented with the flashback to Nibelheim, where you get to see him and of course, battle song and dance. You get to see both via the story and gameplay exactly how strong and vicious he is, and the exact reason why he needs to be stopped. But maybe you're feeling yourself. Maybe you're thinking, that was then and this is now. That Cloud in the flashback was level 1. I've definitely managed to at least start closing that gap a bit, what with my newly improved gear and higher level and better materia. Yeah, now I might stand a chance! Oh, you naive human bushel of Geishel greens. You know nothing. And to prove that, here's a 50-foot snake that's custom designed to wreck your shit. This enemy is so deliberately unfair that you're lucky to escape a game over if you encounter it, let alone even come close to defeating the thing. So you have little choice but to go to the nearby farm, do the terribly localized Chocobo tutorial, get the Chocobo lore materia, forget to equip the Chocobo lore materia, quit playing the game for a week because you're so blindingly mad about the Chocobo lore materia, load the game back up, finally catch the Chocobo, and congrats! You finally managed to outsmart the Alaskan bullworm or whatever it was called. Good for you, champ. I'm sure that Sephiroth had just as much trouble with this as you did. Oh. Yeah, it tends to be around this moment that any player who is starting to get a little overconfident in their abilities starts to go,
I might not be as strong as Sephiroth.
You think?
In the original FF7, there's always this sort of sense that we're kind of acting like dogs chasing cars in a sense. Like, what is our plan? What are we going to do even if we do find Sephiroth? Because this dude could tear us to pieces right now. How do we know there's anything we can do to stop him? And the answer to that is simple. There isn't. He wins. Constantly. All the way to the end, and arguably even after that. From beginning to end, there is never a moment where we're not dealing with someone who's way out of our league. And to top it all off, Sephiroth himself knows this, and is more than eager to use it to his advantage. As a result, everything in hindsight feels like he was just stringing us along, never taking us that seriously as a foe, but only interacting with us as a means to get what he desires. And all of these elements, from the dedicated show-don't-tell storytelling leading up to his first appearance, to his cold disregard for us as an opposing force, results in him feeling just as enigmatic and unknowable as he is powerful and intimidating. This is a central piece in what makes Sephiroth so iconic. The sense that he's an unstoppable, apathetic force that we have no choice but to push back against for the sake of survival. not all that different from the meteor he inevitably summons. However, this sense of an unseen mastermind using and disposing of his unwitting pawns would be undeniably lessened if we were regularly interacting with him. The air of mystery and inscrutability around him would be brought down, and, by extension, the sense of serious threat he poses. The fact that we don't see Sephiroth is not a bug, it's a feature. Less is sometimes more. And those of you who have played both the original game and the remake probably see where I'm going with this. There's been some accusations of false advertising around this game, and I'm here to tell you that there has indeed been some deceptive marketing around it, but not in the way that everyone thinks. Final Fantasy VII Remake? Nah, this isn't Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is Final Fantasy VII Kiwami, complete with the new Sephiroth Everywhere system.
Cloud.
From beginning to end, this man does not leave you the hell alone. He is always right around the corner. Literally, he's your next door neighbor. And oh boy, if you thought he was getting too much screen time while he pointlessly taunts Cloud, then you are going to be in for a treat when he gets shoved in as a pointless final boss at the end. Great boss fight, fantastic boss fight, tons of fun, absolutely loved it. What were the stakes again? Because this definitely isn't the real Sephiroth. To be fair, this wasn't hard to see coming and was probably more or less mandatory. You're out of your mind if you don't think that was an order from corporate the moment they decided to greenlight this thing. And consequently, I think we all knew on some level that Sephiroth was always going to be the penultimate fight of any game titled Final Fantasy VII Remake. And that could work fantastically, if done right. So, on that note, here's my question to you, dear viewer. Without referring to outside media, can you explain why it's appropriate for Sephiroth to be the final boss of this game? What does he do in Final Fantasy VII Remake that justifies why an audience should be excited to fight this random silver-haired anime boy at this game's climax? What has he actually done to warrant this serving as the finale to the first chapter of our adventure? And don't give me any of that, oh, we'll find out later nonsense. Of course we will. But why should someone who's never even heard of Sephiroth think of this battle as anything other than a cool fight against some weird dude they don't really understand? Most importantly, why is anyone supposed to find him threatening or intimidating or even compelling? What reasons does Final Fantasy VII Remake give us to feel any kind of strong emotions towards this character? We know he kills Tifa's dad. We know he doesn't like Cloud and wants to cause him harm, but also never does that till the very end for some reason. We watch him kill Barrett, and yeah, sure, bad dude, but it has no lasting consequence, so it has no weight. Finally, we have Aerith's declaration that he's wrong, which is about as close to peak tell-don't-show that this game gets. Pro tip, if your final boss has a huge monologue right before it justifying why they're the final boss, maybe consider a second draft. He doesn't even leave a trail of blood anymore, instead he leaves a trail of, I don't know, dark eco? And even if we accept all the meta text around him and take it for granted that he's meant to be more symbolic than a proper representation of his character, it doesn't change that he never really gets the establishment needed to make him the kind of badass protagonist this game clearly wants him to be. No matter how you look at it, either in comparison to his original depiction or as his own standalone character, this Sephiroth already feels distinctly less intimidating than he should be, and often feels unmoored and inconsequential to his own story as a result. And this is even before we get into the issue of power scaling in here at large already. Like, am I really supposed to believe this Cloud, the Cloud who already cut a fucking train in half and has been able to beat something at least approaching Sephiroth on the power scale, isn't going to be able to handle this oversized Ekans in the next game? What impact is finding the Zolom going to have then? And this isn't some CinemaSin style nitpick bullshit as much as it may sound like it. I couldn't care less about the logic of who should technically be able to beat who in fisticuffs, so long as the story being told is good. Rather, this is about establishing the gap in power between who we currently are and who we need to be in order to even stand a chance against this guy. It's about making sure our antagonist feels like a legitimate obstacle to overcome. And sure, maybe the next part of this remake will come out and will absolutely knock his characterization out of the park and make him into the most intimidating killing machine we've ever seen. But right now, as of this exact moment, after facing him in the finale of this game, bringing this guy down, it's feeling kinda free. as far as I'm concerned, it's not even up for debate. In comparison to his original presentation, Sephiroth has already lost a great deal of the aura of mystery and danger he originally possessed, and I believe this was something that was knowingly sacrificed in order to make the new plot elements work as intended.
But what if he's Advent Children Sephiroth from the future?
Well, boy howdy shit, I sure hope that's not true, because that would be a whole lot of fucking stupid, wouldn't it? Talk about fan service that adds nothing for nothing's sake. We'd all hate that self-serving peak Nomura garbage if that were true, right? Fortunately, I think the small handful of parallels people have noticed to Advent Children probably just boil down to Nomura looking Kitise in the eye and saying, hey, know what'd be cool? Advent Children homage.
Dilly-dally, shilly-shally.
Sure, why not?
Christ, people, isn't it bad enough that we're definitely going to have to deal with Gact at some point without trying to inject this trash into it? Come back when the Ultimania guide verifies it. In the meantime, please don't drag that chocobo manure through my perfectly clean comments section. Now, more importantly, here's the real question, and the one that I think is going to throw off diehard fans pretty hard. Is the fact that they've already more or less functionally abandoned the character and tone of the original Sephiroth inherently bad? I get the impulse to automatically say yes, especially given that this has remake in the title, but, like, why? This game clearly has no interest in being a one-to-one remake, so if it's only interested in exploring its new themes, then that should be completely fine. Well, you know, provided that the new stuff replacing it offers something equally as valuable to the story, which, given the circumstances, is a pretty tall order to say the least. But it is, in theory, doable, which at long last brings us to the biggest deviation of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and the reason so much of not just Sephiroth was changed, but the entire game. I'm naturally talking about the most essential change of all.
But I will not end. Nor will I have you end.
This is...
the edge of creation.
Sephiroth being so massively altered isn't the cause of the game's biggest changes, but a symptom of it. The real major change, and the one I think is making people so uncomfortable with this as a remake, is this game's new and radically different central theme. The main theme of the original FF7 was life. This has been stated repeatedly by multiple people from the original dev team since the game's release back in 1997, and you can see it running through every major narrative choice of the original game. From the live stream to everything about the Cetras to, most importantly, who lives and who dies. It was also decided early on that you can't truly depict the highest highs that life has to offer without also showing the lowest lows. In a word, death. The most obvious and poignant example of this is the original game's most famous scene, and that is certainly where it hits the hardest, but it is far from the only place where we see it play out. Every playable member of the cast has a backstory wholly focused on some kind of loss. Maybe in the form of having a nation that's been humiliated under the throes of corporate imperialism, maybe in the form of an unfulfilled dream that was tragically denied, maybe in the form of being permanently condemned to Hojo's cuck coffin, but more often than not, it takes the form of death. Whether it be at Nibelheim, North Corel, Sector 7, or the deepest part of Cosmo Canyon, so many members of our cast have seen more death than anyone should probably ever see. But critically, the player sees these deaths too. And it all starts with the dropping of the Sector 7 plate and the death of Avalanche. Up until the attack on the Sector 7 pillar, everything about this game is about as cheery as a story about being an eco-terrorist in a cyberpunk dystopia could really hope to be. You drink with your friend at a bar, you hang out with a sassy cutie, you cross-dress to blackmail a mob boss, it's great fun! and then you see Wedge fall to his fucking death. To this day, it's one of the most stark and brutal things I've ever seen a game do to what's supposed to be a comic relief character. And that's just the start of it. Next are Biggs and Jesse, quickly followed by everyone in Sector 7. In the original, there are no apparent survivors to speak of. No mass evacuation effort followed by an attempt to rebuild or anything like that. Make no mistake, the dropping of the plate in the original game is nothing short of mass slaughter. To our knowledge, us, Johnny, and Marlene are the only people to get out of that disaster alive. It's a grim, unforgiving moment that paints the harsh reality we find ourselves in. Sometimes death is not negotiable, sometimes it's not escapable, and sometimes the living are left to pick up the pieces. Final Fantasy VII Remake, however, does not take this scene as seriously. Quite to the contrary, it's sincerely hard to pin down even a single named character death in this game's entire runtime that doesn't have Shinra in their name. While it is still far from completely confirmed, someone could very easily make the case that every member of Avalanche survives FF7R. Likewise, there's no shortage of people who survived the falling of the plate in Sector 7. There's even a whole extended sequence around saving people from the rubble and protecting them from potential dangers after the fact. Don't get me wrong, there are still some people from Sector 7 who are MIA at time of writing, and some of them who we will probably never see again. But everyone that we might immediately worry about is put firmly center stage to reassure us that they're just fine. Now, I am forced to offer you a gentle reminder that this is a fictional story when I tell you that the fact that this innocent child didn't get crushed by a steel plate completely undermines the point of a storyline from a 1990s JRPG. I don't want to seem callous or anything, but let's be real. Kinda hard to have a story about life and death without, death. And FF7R does not have much death. This game does not break the increasingly infamous trend of Nomura fearing the idea of killing any of his named characters. But if there's any game where that's an issue, it's FF7. This game and the ones that follow it will not, cannot have the same theme at this stage. They've already shut the door on that possibility. And who knows, maybe they have something intricately planned for the future releases that will bring all of this back around and really capture the heart of the original. After Rise of the Skywalker, I don't trust like that anymore, but yeah, sure, it could technically happen, why not? The changes to Sephiroth may very well be worth it in the long term. Believe it or not, I'm sincerely not counting that possibility out. Hell, if you wanted to make the case that it was already worth doing purely on the basis of what we've already got, I wouldn't blame you. There's a whole lot to love there. But in its own way, that only makes it stranger. This game recaptures a whole lot about the original game in stunning detail, but it already left the theme that defined it behind. Will Aerith die in this version? Will they reject the original and allow her to live? Frankly, as of this exact moment, who cares? Right now, her death would serve no thematic purpose. It wouldn't resonate with anything else the story is trying to say, and would, in fact, kinda go against it. After all, it's hard to say predestination is trash while also railroading your most beloved character towards certain death, isn't it? I am strongly tempted to say that the most shocking thing we've lost so far is death, but that's a lie. The truth is that the most chilling aspect of all of this is this game's refusal to grant us any amount of certainty. I no longer have any idea what this game is going to be. This does not have the same theme as the original FF7, nor do I think it wants to. Its new theme is about predestination, both literally in regards to our cast being forced towards a specific destiny the planet has picked out for them, and figuratively in regards to how the creators of this game are supposedly obliged to not deviate from the plan set out by the original. Moreover, it's about pushing back against those fates for the sake of forging your own path, disregarding whatever was intended for you so you can see a future shaped by your own choices. An ethos that is going to inevitably impact the story of Final Fantasy VII itself as time goes on. So, anyone want to tell me how I'm supposed to feel about that? Am I supposed to be mad because this isn't going to be the kind of remake I was promised? Am I supposed to be hyped to find out what happens next? Should I be nervous because while this game was good, this is still modern Square Enix we're talking about, and there remains any number of ways they can screw this up? Because I'll tell you how I feel. A perfect 50-50 blend of anxious and excited. But here's the catch with all of this in case you've forgotten. I love this game. A lot. This is absolutely amazing, and I want so badly to see more of it. I want so badly to spend time with these characters and the world they inhabit that I've already squeezed just about every ounce of content from this game that it has to offer. I am so desperate to see what it will be that I'm having a hard time making this video because all I really want to do is play it all over again. Legit new game, all the way from the beginning. The more I think about it, the more I love it, and the more I want to spend time with it. I'm happy that Jessie's probably alive, because I want to see more of this world with her. I sincerely want her to be a full party member. This isn't a joke, Nomura. Everything about this can't help but make me feel like a group of people who once gave me something great have come together to try and make me feel the way I felt all those years ago, once again. There's so many ways to screw this up, so many unique things they can get completely wrong, and we won't know how it truly plays out for years. But there were moments in here that made me feel ways I haven't felt since I was a kid. Something that recaptured some tiny speck of lost innocence I had squirreled away. And if there's even a 1% chance that this might turn into something that can make me feel the way I felt when I was experiencing FF7 for the first time again, then you're out of your mind if you don't think I'm going to see how those dice land. The most frustrating part of all of this, and I think the unease a lot of us feel, is that it's hard not to have the same questions and anxieties coming out of this experience that we had going in. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a very, very good game. But whether the reality of a true remake of Final Fantasy VII will be able to live up to the expectations set by its predecessor still remains to be seen. We have way more reason to be hopeful now, but given how radically they can stray from here, and how long this journey may turn out to be, it's hard to say. If nothing else though, I think it's safe to say that Nomura and staff definitely got us to feel exactly what Cloud and crew were feeling at the exact moment they stood on that bridge.
Freedom. Boundless, terrifying freedom. Like a great, never-ending sky. I guess maybe that's why I hesitated.
The future right now is filled with endless possibilities. Some potentially tragic and terrible, others offering the promise of something truly astonishing. But no matter what, we'll eventually have to face it. Together. Hey y'all, Ryan here. Thanks for watching. Remember that time I said I was going to start making shorter videos? God damn it, Nomura. Yeah, after playing this I had something I needed to get out of my system, but here it is. Going to take a short break after this, because this was the fastest turnaround on anything I've ever made and I need a moment to breathe. But regular content will be coming back again very soon. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, leave me a love letter in the comments, or a hate letter, whatever. Dislike too while you're at it. It's all the same to me. It's all engagement. YouTube has completely numbed my ability to feel emotions anymore, so it doesn't matter. Whatever. I just live off attention. Maybe you can just hunt me for sport next. Oh, god damn it. Okay, in all seriousness though, thank you for watching. Want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's supporting me on Patreon, because without them, none of this would be possible. People such as Revan, Thomas Hederman, Neo Nico, Rebirth Path, Kevin Thurber, Black Mage App, and everyone else. As always, thank you all so much. And I think I'll leave it at that for today. This has been quite enough. Thank you for watching. I love y'all. Peace.